Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Ramirez, and welcome to the Hit List Podcast, a podcast where me and a guest cross off films from our watch list and discuss them. This is Season 5, Episode 9. Today, I'm joined by producer and host of the Unsung History podcast, Kelly Therese Pollock. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So before we get started, I have two questions for you. My first question is, what are your viewing habits? Whenever you sit down to watch a movie, do you stick to your favorites or do you watch something new?
I actually don't watch a whole lot of movies anymore these days. I've got two kids, and I realized that ever since my kids were born 11 and 8 years ago, I haven't watched very many movies. I watch a lot of TV, but not a whole bunch of movies. But yeah, I'd say I stick with my old favorites when I do.
Gotcha. You don't watch, do your kids watch movies?
Yeah, so I've definitely seen kids movies. I've seen like Lego Batman and stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff I watch now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at least Lego Batman movies, a pretty good movie.
Yes.
Okay. So my second question for you is, what's something about you people would be surprised to know?
So I think one thing, I've been thinking a lot about college lately because this movie came out while I was in college. And I expect a lot of people would not guess that I was an intramural athlete in
Really?
college. And so I actually I was the IM chair for my dorm, and I played football. And not just the co-ed football, but I played on the men's football team too sometimes when they just needed an extra person. So yeah, and I broke my finger once. The only bone I've ever broken, I broke playing football in college.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I was never a sports person. People always expected me to become one because I'm so tall and big. And I was like, no, let me read.
I'm a runner, but I'm typically not a team sports kind of person. So yeah.
Yeah, I get that. That's really cool. I want to brag that I've never broken a bone. So I'm going to brag about that.
I think you need to knock on some wood or something if you say that.
Yeah. Yeah, there we go. So today we're going to be talking about a film that I don't want you to feel old, Kelly, but I was 1 year old when this movie came out. And you said you were in college.
I was in college, yes.
we're discussing is Titanic, released in 1997. Titanic is a 1997 American epic romance and disaster film directed and written, produced, and co-edited by James Cameron. Incorporating both historical and fictionalized aspects, it is based on accounts of the sinking of the RMS Titanic and stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet as members of different social classes who fall in love aboard the ship during its ill-fated maiden voyage. Also starring are Billy Zane, Kathy Bates, Frances Fisher, Gloria Stewart, Bernard Hill, Jonathan Hyde, Victor Garber, and Bill Paxton. This film was on Kelly's watches. Kelly, how have you gone 25 years not seeing this film?
I mean, at some point, it almost became like a point of pride that I hadn't seen it, I think. No, it's really odd. So I was looking back recently on the Academy Award winners, and I had seen all of the Academy Award winners of the 90s otherwise. Had seen like everything that had been nominated for Academy Awards in the 90s because I was in high school and college. That was like the time in my life that I was watching more movies than any other time, especially in college. Because I had no money, right? And so they had like second run movies on campus and we'd go see them. But this one I hadn't seen.
That bewilders me so much because, I obviously didn't see the movie when it came out, but it was just a staple of families that they'll have the two VHS tapes that came together in their home. And my sister was obsessed with this movie growing up because she didn't care about like the modern, at the present day version. She loved like the Titanic part. She loved the high society stuff, like the falling in love part, and she loved watching the disaster happening. She just loves disaster films in general, but to combine two of her favorites, romance and disaster, she loved it. And so I'd seen bits and pieces of it throughout the years, but I don't remember the last time I've seen it all the way throughout. And
it's a long movie.
It is a very long movie. It's 3 hours and 12 minutes, I believe, the official runtime. And it bewilders me that they want the original vision that James Cameron had was to have it 5 hours. And then after that, they said, okay, 4 hours. But then after that, they said, no, let's cut it down to 3 hours. And he didn't want to go below that. Yeah.
I was complaining on Facebook about the length of it, and one of my friends said, "Have you considered just running your TV into an iceberg? That'll shorten it."
Oh, yeah. I like your friend.
Indeed.
So, Kelly, what did you think?
I was expecting it to be better than it was.
Wow.
So I guess I hadn't seen it, for whatever reason. I think my boyfriend in college didn't want to see it, and so we never saw it then, and it just, sort of never watched it since then. And I had never had a deep interest in watching it, but I had always assumed it was just an incredible movie because, it won Best Picture and a million Oscars and had these great stars in it and music and everything. And so I think I went in perhaps with expectations that were a little too high because it did not live up to those expectations in my mind.
You just waited too long. That's why.
Maybe 25 years ago, I would have been swept up in the romance of it. I will say my whole family watched it. My husband had seen it before, but my kids loved it. They, especially my 8-year-old son, he just thought it was just amazing.
Mm-hmm. So they watched it with you?
Yeah. So which meant that it took us 5 nights to watch it because we were watching it after dinner before bedtime each night. And it took 5 nights to get through it.
I just watched it all again last night. And afterwards, hold on. I borrowed the DVD from my library.
Wow.
And it's actually 2 DVDs too. So because the first one is like the first half of the movie. And the second one is the second half plus the deleted scenes. Mm-hmm. And did you know there are 30 deleted scenes? 30. Because remember, it originally was going to be, he wanted it to be 5 hours. And they said, okay, maybe 4 hours. And eventually cut down to 3. And James Cameron introduced the deleted scenes first in the special features. He said these were cut either for pacing or for historical accuracy. It just wasn't needed, or it was just redundant, and there are quite a few scenes in here that look amazing. It looks like the finished product. It looks like if you just cut it in, it would have been fine. That's exactly how he intended to show it in the DVD special features. But for overall, I believe he was right in cutting most of them, including the alternate ending, which I will discuss later, because that alternate ending sucked. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think there were things missing. Like, as long as the movie was, I think there's stuff that's missing from it that would have helped. But I think you didn't need quite so much time on the ship as it was breaking up. It took real time of the ship breaking up.
You said something missing. What did you think was missing?
So I would have, from the sort of romance perspective, would have really appreciated more backstory of both Rose and Jack. We get a little tiny bit, but I can describe it in one sentence, basically. I would have liked a little bit more. I would have cared more about them as characters if I'd known just a little bit more about them. We don't even know why Rose was in England at all. What's she doing there? I don't know. She's an American. It made it so they didn't totally feel like real people to me because they just looked like, there was a one sentence description somewhere of what they were. And so that I think if I was going to add anything to the movie, hopefully taking something else out so it wasn't, 5 hours long, I would add a couple of scenes that would talk more about their backstory.
I mean, there are, like you said, there are a couple of sentences here and there, like Rose's mother discusses your father died. He left us with so much debt. That's why you had to marry this man and whatnot. And you kind of hear Jack's story as he relates my parents died and I decided to travel the world after that, yada, yada.
Yeah.
I kind of disagree. I don't think it would have been necessary to add more stuff into that, add more backstory because it's about the Titanic as it happened. And they never known each other before this ship happened.
Yeah.
And so Yeah, it's really about like, because remember the narrative device is that she's recollecting this story. It's like a flashback as she's telling the crew on the ship that's trying to find the heart of the ocean what actually happened and where the heart of the ocean may be. So, and that I kind of disagree with you, but it's like I understand where you're coming from with it.
Yeah, I mean, so it might make sense that we don't know more of Jack's backstory, but we should know more of Rose's backstory. And there are scenes in there where she's with her mom or with Cal, where she's not with Jack. Like there could have just been a couple more sentences somewhere that just told us a little bit more.
For me, I think it's the opposite for me. Like her backstory was like, okay, we kind of get it. For me, it's like what happened afterwards for her, because in the end, we find out she had the heart of the ocean the whole entire time, and then she goes out as like a very old 101-year-old woman, walks out barefoot in this ship, has the heart of the ocean, and just goes and throws it into the ocean, right? And I'm like, that's what they're here for, right? And then when she dies in her sleep, she sees a vision she sees everyone again from the Titanic, right? And she's with Jack again. And I'm thinking like that happened when she was 17. She lived a full life. She lived over a century, just a year over a century. Yeah. She had a whole life after Titanic.
She had another husband, like a husband and kids.
She had kids. She had grandkids. And that's what she sees when she dies.
Yeah.
That's what always, even since I was like 9, I think maybe even 7, I'm like, where's her husband?
I know. Yeah. No,
that's what messed me up.
Like, why did you keep the necklace all that time to then just drop it in the ocean? Like, you could have kept it, because presumably she never told her mom that she was still alive. She never told Cal she was still alive. So she must have been penniless leaving the ship, right? Like she was with the third class passengers. Like you could have used that time to, get back on your feet, but no.
Yeah. So that's actually part of the alternate ending.
Interesting.
So, I want to talk a little bit more about this stuff. So what did you like in this film? And after we talk about a little bit of that, I think we can go into the ending and the alternate ending. Yeah. So what did you like?
So, I mean, it was beautiful. It was a gorgeous movie. Like your sister, I think the high society stuff is really fun, sort of just, I think they could have developed more about the sort of class difference, but it was really interesting to see the sort of the way that these first class passengers were living. This, like, you forget it's a boat because they're,
right.
It's just massive in scale. It's beautiful. They've got all of this amazing furnishings. They've got paintings on the boat. Like, it's wild how sort of fancy it is.
The Monet, the Picasso.
Yeah. And then, the third class passengers, of course, have this just like terrible conditions.
Oh, yeah.
So that I thought was really well done, was really interesting. I think, it's clear that James Cameron really loves the story of the Titanic, the disaster. I thought all of that, the sort of nods to historical accuracy, all of that was really interesting and I think really well done. And certainly, as much as I had problems with some of it, I got invested, right? There were like, my kids were like yelling at the screen sometimes, like, no, get the lifeboat, put more people in it, and so like we got into it, even though of course how it's going to end. And having waited 25 years to watch it, I knew like everything about how it was going to end. I think there's still a certain, like, you want to root for people and you want it to turn out okay. And so it still works very much on that level.
Yeah, it's something that I think he's very good at. Like, he has to be. He made Terminator, right? And then he made Terminator 2, and then he made Titanic, and then Avatar. He keeps surpassing each time, like with each decade. And so he's gotten very used to, I guess he's gotten very good at building the suspense for the characters, for the audience. Because even though some people have seen these movies over and over again, they still feel that suspense. They still get invested. And that's something I believe he's very good at with this film. My favorite part is when the ship is sinking and when Rose goes to find Jack and he's still handcuffed.
Mm.
and she's trying to go find someone, but there's no one else in the hallways,
Yeah.
and just gets that sense of like hopelessness, you know?
Yeah.
She can't find anyone to help her, so she finally gets like an ex. And even as a kid, I'm like, oh, whoa. And he's like, okay, do some practice swings. Okay, hit this exact same spot. And she misses. She doesn't hit the same spot.
Yeah.
She like misses by like a margin. He's like, okay, that's enough practice. Now hit. And she gets on the first try. I was like, whoa. Even last night, like I knew what happened, right? I knew what happened. But still, I'm still on the edge of my seat when I'm watching it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's got those action movie elements that you feel like your heart racing, like
Yeah.
are they going to get it? Are they going to do it? And yeah, those things I think are really fun. And of course there's good, like the cinematography is wonderful and the musical accompaniment always helps sort of build that momentum too.
Yeah, and like you were saying about the action part, I think that's why this movie resonated so deeply with like just both. Well, traditionally, when this movie was like came out, people thought it was gonna be a movie just for women because it's a romance.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know about I don't think most people expected the disaster part to be so much of a thriller, and so that's why it's by word of mouth. More people went to go see it beyond like the ideal audience they had for it.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is so great about this, because you have the romance, you had the historical drama to it. And in the first 10 minutes, there's like the scientific discovery type of film. It kind of feels like a documentary, you know? And because it kind of was a little bit, because they actually did shoot the actual Titanic wreckage.
Yeah.
And then when it goes into the historical drama and the romance, people like that, you know, getting to know the characters. And then when it gets to the ship sinking and people trying to fight for survival, that's the thriller part. That's the adventure. That's the suspense. And it makes sense because it actually happened and people are actually trying to fight for their lives, trying to survive. And yeah, that's why I think this movie just did so well. It combines all those elements together, you know? It's not just a romance film. It's not just a thriller film. It's all those in one. But it like progresses in a way that I believe worked for them.
Yeah, well, clearly it made $1 gazillion, so it worked for a lot of people.
Yeah. So, who was your favorite character? There are a lot of characters in here. Who's your favorite?
Probably Molly. She's just so that's one played by Kathy Bates, and
yes.
she's great. She's just spunky, and doesn't seem to care what anybody else thinks, and I thought she was really fun. So I think she's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I liked. She was new rich. Like she's based on an actual woman who was nouveau rich, and I like how she didn't like pretend to be anything else beyond who she was. Unlike the other women in high class society who thought they were above people, they thought like because they're upper decks that they're above them. Like physically you are, but emotionally you're kind of below the gutter, guys. Come on.
Yeah, and she puts Jack in the tux. Like she's willing to help him figure out how to fit in. So yeah, it's she was just a super fun character. Yeah,
because they were expecting him to make a fool out of himself, but she really helped him out right there. She didn't have to. Like he was just a stranger to her, but she was like, "No, I'm gonna help you out." Yeah. So she was really cool. And the actual woman, she actually like commandeered that lifeboat as they were leaving. They didn't. I don't think they showed that much of it. There was like a couple deleted scenes as well. But she commandeered that lifeboat from that man who was on that lifeboat with them. So that's why they called her the unsinkable woman.
Yeah.
So what did you not like? Because I know you said like, what did you want to add? But what did you think could have been without?
So what did I not like? I did not at all like the scene where Cal is chasing them, shooting at them. I thought that was just utterly ridiculous. Like, I get it. He's mad and whatever, but like focus on saving your own life. Don't go shooting people who are on a sinking boat. It felt really unnecessary to me. So it's probably the scene that if I had one thing I would cut, it would be sort of that sequence.
That's actually something that most people have said about the film. And I believe, like, I agree with you on that. That's something that a lot of people agree on, because you guys are gonna die. Don't add unnecessary drama. Get on a lifeboat and get over her. You are 30 years old. She is 17. Get over yourself. That's like the actual ages in like the characters' ages. Like, get over yourself. He is 20 years old. Like, find someone your age.
I know. It was just ridiculous.
And
yeah.
there was another scene where after he's shooting at them and he stops because he ran out of bullets. You remember, like, his guy was like, you good? The scene after that, the guy, he goes after him. So not Cal, but the hired agent dude. He goes after them next. And there's like a whole scene with that, right? And he actually shoots at them, whatever. And they cut it from the film because James thought that it was unnecessary. Like, it was already redundant at that point. Like, there's already a sense of danger from the ship sinking. They don't need to add another sense of danger because someone's shooting at them. So it costs like $1 million a day to shoot that scene. And they kind of just lost the money on that one because it wasn't eventually in the film at all. Including the deleted scenes. It's a really good scene. It's well produced,
Yeah.
as it should be. But they just decided not to put it in there.
They could have decided that with the Cal shooting too.
They really should have, right? They really should have.
It's funny that Cameron had a co-editor because it does feel like it could have used just a little bit more editing, just a little bit tighter in some places that really would have helped.
Which is funny because I'm about to talk about him as director on this film because it's kind of crazy. There's a quote I'm gonna hint at real quick. They tried to. So basically, they said something like this. They said something to him that upset him, and he said, "You want to cut my film? You're gonna have to fire me. You want to fire me? You're gonna have to kill me." So that's a little hint as to how it was like, as I discuss it in the second half of this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I know it's been 25 years, and we're both used to the innovation of movie making since then. But did any of the special effects impress you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very clear that they had used actually practical effects, where I think nowadays they would have used more CGI, and it looked great. I mean, it's the actual water rushing down the staircase and everything, like, that's amazing, and it cost a ton of money, but I'm glad that they did it that way. I think in some ways it looks better than a movie today might look, because they never would spend that much money these days to do practical effects.
Oh yeah, that's something that you kind of like forget about. Okay, so I forgot about that. You're right. If this movie was made today, the water wouldn't have been real.
Right.
They would have used like a bunch of special effects. They would have used a bunch of CGI. But using real water added more sense of the danger. Like, you know that they're about to drown, or you sense the danger of like, don't go down there. The water is gonna pull you away or suck you in, or whatever. And there were some scenes that look a little outdated, but I'm gonna give them more leniency on that because at the time they extended it as far as they could take it, and it was 1997. So they were just doing their best they could, and I'm glad they did that because it still looks pretty good. Like, especially on DVD, it still looks good. I haven't seen it on Blu-ray though.
We watched it on Paramount Plus streaming, which I do not recommend. That is a terrible service. Of all the streaming services, that is the worst.
It's worse than HBO Max?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, we had watched 4 nights already, and we got to the 5th night, and it just gave us an error code. And we Googled the error code, and it doesn't exist. It's not a real error code. And we never got it to play on the TV again. So I had to like cast it from my computer. My computer would still play it, but the TV wouldn't play it anymore. So
it was like the TV app that wasn't working?
Yeah, but we like deleted the app, put it back on. We tried using like the Fire Stick. We tried everything and nothing. So don't go watch it on Paramount Plus.
All right. Thank you. I wasn't gonna, but now I know I'm never gonna.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add about this film before we talk about the production?
Yeah, I mean, the one other thing I would add is just I couldn't believe how silly the dialogue was. I guess everyone else knew this for the past 25 years, but I didn't. And I just, like, the things they were saying were so ridiculous. It really took me out of the romance a little bit,
Can you give an example? Give an example.
Yeah, I mean, now, granted, Rose is supposed to be 17, so she would have said silly stuff. But the scene where he's going to draw her naked and she's like, draw me like one of your French girls, Jack. And it's like, oh, come on. I just, yeah.
Yeah. That's an iconic line too, because it's become a meme. It's become a meme. Like parts of this movie has become a meme. Like
I will say I understand much more of the internet now, having seen this movie, because all these like there were so many moments that I was like, oh, that's the GIF. I get it now.
It's been 87 years. Or was it 84?
84,
Whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, 84. Oh man. Yeah, there's just so much meme culture that comes from this movie because so many people have seen it. You know, it's, I would say it's part of like the film canon of the Western society. I believe that. All right. And for me, I guess my comment about this film, having seen it now as like an adult and after going through the pandemic, you know, two films I believe now resonate with our experience with it is, first one is Jaws. Second one, I believe, is also Titanic, because in both cases, there were people in charge who did not take the experts' advice at hand. They did not take them accordingly, because they only cared about their own money. They only cared about their own interests, about their own publicity, to even consider the lives that were at stake.
Yeah.
And so watching this film and seeing that, I was just like, damn. So it's been a thing for, I guess it's just been a human thing for a while now, and we're still living in that type of thing. And I also, in a more lighthearted sense, I could see it as like the guy who funded the Titanic. I kind of saw him as like Elon Musk, and the Titanic as Twitter.
It was appropriate that we were watching it as like Twitter was imploding. Yeah.
Yeah, literally, like, oh my gosh, it was just like at the exact same time too, when people are saying RIP Twitter, and then people are thinking, oh, is this the last time we're on Twitter? Does anyone want to confess they have a crush on me before we go? Just stuff like that. Like, this man, Elon Musk, really could have just sat back and done nothing, but he instead tried to run it, and now he's effectively ruined the lives of 7,000 people who are working at that company. And I think it should be said, he should be investigated for that, because how can a man just buy a company and just completely run it to the ground essentially within a month, and just get 7,000 people out of a job just like that? And that, and if he goes, like, if he leaves, if he loses that $44 billion, whatever, he'll be unaffected.
I know.
You know, it won't affect him at all. But like the people who worked there for years, who developed that website, they're out of a job. You know, like, hopefully they'll find something else. Like, hopefully they've garnered enough experience. But during this economic time where a lot of layoffs are happening, inflation's high, and not just that, companies are getting greedy with their prices. I just see it like, damn, Titanic allegory here, sir.
Yeah. Full speed ahead. Forget the safety.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's all I saw it as. I was like, damn. We're living it. But like,
we are. We're living
like,
a disaster movie.
Allegorically. but also pandemic.
Yeah.
Where a lot of people died unnecessarily. So I think that's it for me. Do you have any final thoughts on what you thought about the film?
You know, I just, it felt like, I know you were saying it was so many different things and that's what draw people in. I feel like it was maybe just one too many things. Like, it would have been a better movie if it was just romance and disaster without the like action and documentary pieces, or, you know, like something that there was a way, despite the silly dialogue, there was a way, I think, to save it for me to be like a truly great movie. And I think it just didn't quite get there.
I was listening to a podcast. I forgot the name of it. Oh, I wish I could remember the name. Actually, let me look it up real quick, because I want to give them some credit. Hi there, this is editor Jason speaking. The name of the podcast is called Unspooled with Amy Nicholson and Paul Scheer. I think the premise of the podcast is like, if you had to send a movie out into space, so like another intelligent species could see it and understand human society or whatever, which movie would it be? And each episode they talk about a different film. They talk about the context of the film, what was happening in the world around that time, how did the actors get the job, and then what's the legacy of it, and then also like what's significance of the film. So they did one on The Dark Knight, right? And they obviously they loved it because it's a very influential film.
Yeah.
But then they also said like it's a little too much movie for me because it's a lot happens in The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Like in the scene they talk about in particular is the scene where, have you seen The Dark Knight?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you remember that scene where he goes out in that boat with all the Russian ballerinas?
Yeah, yeah.
So and then like he dives into the water so he can go swim to the airplane to take him to Hong Kong. He said like that scene in particular could have been done without in the film because at that point it just felt like too much movie right there.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I think that your comment about the Titanic reminded me of that comment right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if it were up to me making the movie, I think the only reason that whole documentary framing device is there at all is because James Cameron wanted an excuse to take a submarine down and look at the Titanic. And I feel like you could do without the framing device. Like that adds 45 minutes that isn't really necessary to the story. So James Cameron, if you want to do another cut of the movie, just take out the framing device.
I think he would yell at you.
He would not agree with me. Yes.
Oh man. But I guess I'm ready to talk about what went into this film. We're going to talk about a little about the production of this film. That's the second half of this podcast. A lot went into this film. You know, it's a very influential one. For a while there, it was the highest grossing film in America. It was also the most expensive film ever made. So, of course, there's a lot of history that went into it. So, but I do edit this podcast, and I'm trying to keep it as minimal as possible. So, if it feels like I'm going over a lot, trust me, I'm not even scratching the surface on this. I'm going to talk about the cast first. So, the fictional characters. So, there's Leonardo DiCaprio as Jack Dawson. So, Cameron said he wanted someone. He needed the cast to feel like they were really on the Titanic to relive its liveliness and to, quote, take that energy and give it to Jack, an artist who was able to have his heart soar, unquote. And so Jack in the film, he's portrayed as a poor orphan from Wisconsin who has traveled the world, including Paris, sketching, French girls in the nude. He wins 2 third-class tickets to board the Titanic literally 5 minutes before they depart, along with his friend Fabrizio, his Italian friend. He's attracted to Rose at first sight, and her fiance's invitation down with them at the next evening enables Jack to mix with the first-class passengers for a night. So there were established actors who were considered for this role. Let me know if you recognize a few of them. There was Matthew McConaughey,
Yeah.
Chris O'Donnell, Billy Crudup, and Stephen Dorff. They were all considered, but he felt that they were all too old to play the part of a 20-year-old at the time. Tom Cruise was also interested, but his asking price was too high. And Cameron considered Jared Leto for the role, but he refused to audition. And I'm glad he did.
That would have been a very 90s movie then.
Jeremy Sisto did a series of screen tests with Winslet and 3 other actresses vying for the role of Rose, which I will discuss when I discuss Rose. And DiCaprio, he was 21 at the time, and he was brought to Cameron's attention by casting director Molly Finn. And Cameron said, quote, he read it once and started goofing around. Talking about the romantic scene, the first romantic scene. He read it once and started goofing around, and I could never get him to focus on it again. But for one split second, a shaft of light came down from the heavens and lit up the forest. And unquote. Cameron, he believed in DiCaprio's acting ability and told him, quote, look, I'm not going to make this guy brooding and neurotic. I'm not going to give him a tick and a limp and all the things you want. Because he envisioned him as a James Stewart type. And although Jack Dawson is a fictional character, there is actually one of the victims was a Jay Dawson, but it was a Joseph Dawson who was a trimmer in the engine room. And it wasn't until after the movie came out that they found this out.
Interesting.
Yeah, there was an actual Jay Dawson gravestone. They did a lot of research into this film, so I'm surprised that they missed that one.
Yeah, that is kind of surprising.
So then there's Kate Winslet as Rose DeWitt Bukater? Rose DeWitt Bukater. Yeah, whatever. It's Rose. Cameron said Winslet, quote, had the thing that you look for, and there was a quality in her face, in her eyes, and he just knew that people would be ready to go the distance for her. But the thing is, he wasn't confident in her at first. So Rose is a 17-year-old girl, originally from Philadelphia, who was forced into engagement to 30-year-old Cal Hockley, so she and her mother, Ruth, can maintain their high-class status after her father's death had left the family debt-ridden. Rose boards the RMS Titanic with Cal and Ruth as a first-class passenger and meets Jack. Winslet said of her character, she has a lot to give, and she's got a very open heart, and she wants to explore and adventure the world, but she feels that's not going to happen. Quite a few actresses were considered for this role. There was Gwyneth Paltrow, Winona Ryder, Claire Danes, Gabrielle Anwar, and Reese Witherspoon. And when they all turned it down, Winslet campaigned heavily for this role. She sent Cameron daily notes from England, which led Cameron to invite her to Hollywood for auditions. And as the same with DiCaprio, casting director Mally Finn originally brought her to Cameron's attention. And when he was looking for the woman to play Rose, he was looking for someone to play an Audrey Hepburn type. And was initially uncertain about casting Winslet even after her screen test impressed him. And after she screen tested with DiCaprio, she was so impressed with him, she whispered to Cameron, like, he's great. Even if you don't pick me, pick him. And yeah, Winslet sent Cameron a single rose with a card signed, "From your Rose," and lobbied him by phone. She said, "You don't understand." She pleaded one day when she reached him by mobile phone in his Humvee. Yeah, look at that. He had a mobile phone in his Humvee. I am Rose.
1997.
I don't know. I think it might have been 1985 at that point, but still. She said, I am Rose. I don't know why you're even seeing anyone else. And her persistence, as well as her talent, eventually convinced him to cast her in the role.
I wonder if she made a lot of money from it, presumably, but, it sounded like pretty miserable filming conditions. I wonder if she regretted all that work that she did to get the job.
I don't know about what she said afterwards, but she did get injured during making this film.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about that, about James Cameron as a director.
Yeah.
So there was Gloria Stewart as Rose Dawson Calvert, the 101-year-old Rose. So Rose narrates the film in a modern day framing device. Cameron stated, quote, "In order to see the present and the past, I decided to create a fictional survivor who is close to 101 years old. And she connects us in a way through history." Yeah, so the 100-year-old Rose gives Lovett information regarding the heart of the ocean after he discovers a new drawing of her in the wreck. She shares the story of her time aboard the ship and speaks about her relationship with Jack for the first time since the sinking. At 87, Gloria Stewart had to be made up to look older for the role. And when they were talking about casting Stewart, Cameron stated, "My casting director found her. She was sent out on a mission to find retired actresses from the golden age of the 30s and 40s. He considered Fay Wray for the role, and he also didn't know who Gloria Stewart was. But he said, but Stewart was just so into it and so lucid and has such a great spirit. And I saw the connection between her spirit and Winslet's spirit. I saw this, it's a French word, I don't know, joie de vivre, in both of them, that I thought the audience would be able to make that cognitive leap that it's the same person."
Yeah.
What'd you think of the old Rose?
She was fine. I was surprised to learn that she had been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. I was like, she was fine. Like, it was fine. Clearly, I'm not a huge fan of the whole framing thing. So
Yeah.
It was okay. I think I see the sort of, they don't seem like they look at all alike, but I can see that sort of like same spunk, like that part does feel, I think, right.
Yeah. It's like with, I'm not too into the Oscars anymore too. I've noticed a pattern, but whenever a movie is like really popular one year, they nominate them for everything. Mm-hmm. I guess Titanic was one of those films. The most recent year I can think of is 2016 when La La Land was nominated for everything and almost won Best Picture. But oh no, it was a mistake. It was actually Moonlight who won. I was there when it happened. I was like, what? Yeah, so Billy Zane as Caledon Hockley. Caledon? I think it's Caledon. Is Rose's arrogant and snobbish 30-year-old fiance who is the heir to the Pittsburgh steel fortune. He becomes increasingly embarrassed by, jealous of, and cruel about Rose's affection for Jack. The part was originally offered to Matthew McConaughey, and Rob Lowe has also gone on record as having pursued it. So it would have been a very 90s film with Rob Lowe in there.
Very, very 90s. It might have been better. And that was the one character that just didn't seem like a real person at all to me. Like, felt very kind of over the top.
Yeah. I think that's what I liked about it though. Like sometimes you just need like an over the top character.
Yeah.
Sometimes
A
he just
villain
needs,
to
like,
just hate.
yeah, exactly. I think that's what he was there for, and I think he did a good
Yeah.
job with that. As far as historical people who actually existed, like Victor Garber as Thomas Andrews. So I learned that he actually lived. You know, there are testimonies that he actually survived. There were sightings of Andrews after the moment when he was in a smoking room and just adjusting the clock. He stayed in there for some time to gather spots, then he continued assisting with the evacuation. And there's another reported sighting of Andrews throwing deck chairs into the ocean for passengers to use as floating devices. And he was last seen leaving the ship at the last moment. So he actually survived.
Huh.
And Ewan Stewart as First Officer Willie Murdoch. He's the guy that shot the Irishman by accident. So he was based on that was an actual person. His nephew, the actual person's nephew, saw the film, and he objected to his uncle's portrayal as damaging to his heroic reputation. A few months later, Fox Vice President Scott Neeson went to Scotland, where Murdoch lived, to deliver a personal apology and present a £5,000 donation to Dalbeattie High School to boost the school's William Murdoch Memorial Prize. And James Cameron apologized in a DVD commentary, but stated that there were officers who fired gunshots to enforce the women and children first policy. And according to Cameron, his depiction of Murdoch is that of an honorable man, not a man gone bad or a cowardly murderer. He added, I'm not sure you find that same sense of responsibility and total devotion to duty today. This guy had half his lifeboats launched before his counterpart on the port side had even launched one. That says something about character and heroism. And this is my favorite character. This is my personal favorite right here. Liam Tuohy as Chief Baker Charles Eugen. I think that's how you say his name. This is the baker that appears in the film helping Rose stand up after she falls, following her and Jack to the ship's stern and hanging onto the ship's railings as it sinks, drinking brandy from a flask. This, I was so happy to learn, was a real person.
Wow.
Like for years, I thought he was just something they made just for like comedic relief.
Yeah.
No. Based on an actual person who survived, by the way,
Wow.
So according to the real guy's testimony, he rowed the ship down, stepped into the water without getting his hair wet. He also admitted to hardly feeling the cold, most likely thanks to the alcohol.
Hear that, kids? Alcohol saves lives.
Just hearing that, I'm like, all these years I thought he was just a dumb character they made to like have some sense of comic relief, but no, he was real. The reason he survived is because he got drunk. And there's also a deleted scene with the baker as well. He's shown throwing deck chairs overboard before taking a drink from his bottle. I want to talk about writing and inspiration. So you are right in the sense that James Cameron shot the actual wreckage because he himself was interested in this. You know, before he got into the arts, he went to college for science. You know, and he felt like he was past the point in his life where he wouldn't be able to go on an undersea expedition and do what he wanted to do that he originally thought he was going to do. So when he saw the chance to, they actually had like IMAX footage of the RMS Titanic wreckage, he pitched it to Hollywood saying, we should shoot the wreckage ourselves too. He tried to seek like funding from them to make a movie. And it wasn't because, he said, it was not because I particularly wanted to make the movie. I just wanted to dive to the shipwreck.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like that.
Yeah. So if he still like made them a ton of money, so I guess they're grateful for him after that. He wrote the script for the Titanic film, met with 20th Century Fox executives, including Peter Chernin, and pitched it as Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic. He said, and here's what he said, how they were like. He said, they were like, okay, a 3-hour romantic epic? Sure, that's just what we want. Is there a little bit of Terminator of that? Any Harrier jets, shootouts, or car chases? I said, no, it's not like that. And so he said they were doubtful of the idea about its like commercial aspects, but they were hoping for a more of a long-term relationship with him, so they decided to give him the green light. Yeah, so he convinced Fox to promote the film based on the publicity afforded by shooting the Titanic wreck itself. and organized several dives to the site over a period of 2 years. He said, my pitch on that had to be a little more detailed. So I said, look, we've got to do this whole opening where they're exploring the Titanic and they find the diamond. So we're going to have all those shots of the ship. Now we can either do them with elaborate models and motion control shots and CG and all that, which will cost X amount of money, or we can spend X plus 30% and actually go to shoot it at the real wreck. So you're right. This is just James Cameron just wanting to go see this shipwreck. He's always had a fascination with shipwrecks. Yeah, so they shot the real wreck at the Atlantic Ocean 12 times in 1995. And at that depth, the water pressure is 6,000 pounds per square inch. And one small flaw in the vessel's superstructure would mean instant death for everyone on board. So not only they were a high risk, it prevented Cameron from getting high quality footage that he wanted. And during one dive, one of the submersibles collided with the Titanic's hull, damaging both the sub and ship and leaving fragments of the ship's propeller shroud scattered around the superstructure. And the external bulkhead of the Captain Smith's quarters collapsed, exposing the interior, and the area around the entrance to the grand staircase was also damaged.
Jeez.
So yeah. He wrecked the shipwreck. So, and also the character of Bill Paxton is a little bit based on James himself. Because you see in the final moments of the film, Bill Paxton's character, he says something along the lines of, for 3 years, this has been my whole life. But just now I'm finally understanding what actually happened, the human lives that died. And that's pretty much what Cameron felt when he was here. So descending to the actual site made both Cameron and the crew want to live it to that level of reality. But there was like another level of reaction coming away from the real wreck, which was, it wasn't just a story. It wasn't just a drama. It was an event that happened to real people who really died. And working around the wreck for so much time, you get a strong sense of the profound sadness and injustice of it and the message of it. He says, you think there probably aren't going to be many filmmakers who go to Titanic. There may never be another one, maybe a documentarian. And so he said, due to this, he felt like a huge responsibility to convey the emotional message of it and to do part of it right too. Mm-hmm. And he wants to honor the people who died. So he spent 6 months researching all the Titanic's crew and passengers. He said he read everything he could, and he made a timeline of the ship's few days and a very detailed timeline of the last night of its life. He said he had a library that filled one whole wall of his writing office with Titanic stuff because he wanted to get it right, especially if they were going to dive to the ship. And it just set the bar higher for him just to get the historical accuracy. Yeah. And I'm going to talk about this real quick because it still bothers me. And it doesn't have to do with James Cameron himself. It has to do with a man called Neil deGrasse Tyson. So in 2012, when this film was re-released to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Titanic's shipwreck, it was re-released both, at least I guess, more high definition and in 3D. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you don't know him, he's a scientist. He's a popular scientist. He's used as a figurehead for guest stuff to like explain science. And he also has this reputation of being an asshole about movies and about popular culture. Yeah. For example, he said like Santa Claus can exist because of this and this and that, because of the science behind this, because of the radius of that, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, bro, we know. It's just a story we have, okay?
Yeah,
and
right.
There's several other examples. But here's what he said about Titanic. There's the moment when Rose is on the ocean. She's on the door and she's looking up at the sky, at the night sky full of stars. He said those stars weren't in that position in 1912. And he said like James Cameron, being the perfectionist he is, should have caught that. And when I read this in high school, right? It's 2012. I read this in high school. I'm like, does it matter? Does it actually matter that the stars aren't in the accurate position? Who would notice that? Who would notice that? But a scientist who has nothing better to do than to pause the film and say, off by 30 degrees. Like, for those of you who've been listening to the podcast a while, you know how much I hate people like that. I've lived through this, because who cares? Okay, there's a certain level of disbelief you can, like a suspension of disbelief you hold when you watch a movie. Did it really stop for you when you saw the stars?
And we're like over 3 hours into the movie at that point too.
Exactly.
I was like, just get on with it.
So that part always bewildered me. Yeah, like, bro, you weren't concerned about the dolphins in the beginning of the film that were swimming right alongside. You weren't concerned about that. Even then, they were there for like a second and they were gone. Like, okay. But that was it. The stars in the night sky.
Yep.
Bro, grow up, dude. Grow up. It's a movie, okay? It's not a documentary. It's a movie. Yeah. I just had to discuss this because it's just so annoying, like Fabrizio. Okay, not like Fabrizio. I thought he was a sweet kid, but still.
I'm sure you're not the only person to ever be annoyed by Neil deGrasse Tyson.
So, let's see. Oh, so for the scale modeling of this movie, they used scale models. Harland and Wolff, the RMS Titanic's builders, opened their private archives to the crew, sharing blueprints that they were thought were lost. Wow. And for the ship's interiors, production designer Peter Lamont's team looked for the artifacts from the era. The newness of the ship meant that every prop had to be made from scratch. So that's what caused it to go up so high. Yeah. Not because of Tom Cruise, because all the props had to be made from scratch.
That's a good thing they didn't get Tom Cruise then.
It's a very good thing. So the ship was built to full scale, but Lamont removed redundant sections on the superstructure and other stuff. Yeah, I'm not a ship person. I don't know bolts. So no, that was just pre-production. So as far as production, principal photography began on July 31st, 1996 at Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, with the filming of the modern day expedition scenes aboard that Russian ship. It's called the Academic Mistletoe Keldysh. I don't know Russian, so I know I got academic right. And in September 1996, the production moved to the newly built Fox Baja Studios in Rosarito, Mexico, where a full-scale RMS Titanic had been constructed. And for the safety of the stuntmen, many props were made of foam rubber. And a full-time etiquette coach was hired to instruct the cast in the manners of upper-class gentility in 1912. However, despite this, several critics picked up on anachronisms in the film, not least involving the two main stars. And do you want to know who actually sketched the nude portrait?
Sure.
James Cameron. He's an artist. He's a legit artist.
I assume he used someone else as a model rather than Kate Winslet.
I guess he just did something.
Yeah.
Like he just made it up. And that was actually the first scene they shot together because everything else was still being built. Yeah. So that was like Kate Winslet's and Leonardo DiCaprio's first day on set. First stuff on set. Cameron said it wasn't by any kind of design, although I couldn't have designed it better. There's a nervousness and an energy and a hesitance in them. They had rehearsed together, but they hadn't shot anything together. If I had a choice, I probably would have preferred to put it deeper into the body of the shoot. But they just weren't ready for months, so they just had to shoot something, and that was the first stuff they shot. So I was hinting at this throughout this episode. James Cameron throughout this film was known as the scariest man in Hollywood. Do you want to take a guess why?
I mean, it just seems like it was brutal to shoot, so I'm guessing it has to do with that.
Yeah, so he became known as an uncompromising and hard-charging perfectionist and a 300 decibel screamer with a megaphone and a walkie-talkie, and swooping down into people's faces on a 162-foot crane. So for those of you who aren't familiar, sometimes directors will have like a seat on a crane and they'll go over different shots of the area to get more angles or whatever, just to overlook the crew. And sometimes these directors like to have fun and just go down, swoop down into people and be like, hey, what you doing? And Winslet, she chipped a bone in her elbow during filming and had been worried that she would drown in a 17-meter-gallon tank. I'm not sure if it's million or meter. It's a 70-gallon water tank. Either way, it was a lot of water.
Yeah.
In which the ship was to be sunk. She was like worried that she would drown. And she said, there were times when I was genuinely frightened of him. Jim has a temper like you wouldn't believe. She said, so God damn it, he would yell at some poor crew member. That's exactly what I didn't want. And her co-star, Bill Paxton, was familiar with Cameron's work ethic because of his early experience with him. He said, there are a lot of people on set, and Jim is not one of those guys who has the time to win hearts and minds. Yeah. And the crew felt like he had like a evil alter ego, said like they nicknamed him Midge, which is Jim spelled backwards. And in response to this criticism, Cameron stated, filmmaking is war, a great battle between business and aesthetics. And I've watched his masterclass on the website, and I think I remember him saying like he regrets being such an asshole. Like he didn't have to do, like he could have been half as an asshole and it still would have been made, you know?
Yeah.
He later stated like, you know, the film is going to exist, but like people are going to remember how you treated them for the rest of their lives, you know?
Yeah.
And most of the time, it's just not worth it to yell at them. So he regrets some of his attitude. And, I forgot to mention when I was going overview of all my notes here, did you know about the roofied soup?
No.
Okay. So during the shoot in the Russian ship in Canada, an angry crew member put PCP into the soup that Cameron and various others ate one night in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and it sent more than 50 people to the hospital, including Bill Paxton. There were people just rolling around completely out of it. Some of them were like seeing streaks and psychedelics, and Cameron managed to vomit before the drug took full effect on him. And Abernathy saw him. He was shocked at the way he looked. He said one eye was completely red, like the Terminator eye. A pupil, no iris, beet red. The other eye looked like he'd been sniffing glue since he was 4. And here's what sucks. The person behind the poisoning was never caught.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine that. Like your whole crew gets poisoned and you never knew who it was.
And you never know if they're going to do it again.
Exactly. That's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the filming schedule was intended to be 138 days, but it grew to 160, and it officially wrapped in March 23rd, 1997. And many cast members came down with colds, flu, or kidney infections after spending hours in cold water, including Winslet. In the end, she decided she would not work with Cameron again unless she earned a lot of money. Several others left the production and 3 stuntmen broke their bones, but the Screen Actors Guild decided, following an investigation, that nothing was inherently unsafe about the set. Additionally, DiCaprio said that there was no point when he felt he was in danger during filming, and Cameron believed in a passionate work ethic and never apologized for the way he ran his sets, although he acknowledged, I'm demanding on my crew. In terms of being kind of militaresque, I think there's an element of that in dealing with thousands of extras and big logistics and keeping people safe. I think you had to have a fairly strict methodology in dealing with a large number of people, which again, he did later state.
Yeah.
He kind of regretted most of what he did. Now, the cost of filming Titanic began to mount and finally reached $200 million, at the time, the most expensive film ever.
Yeah.
Which was a bit over $1 million per minute of screen time. Like, this was unthinkable at the time.
Yeah.
Fox executives, they panicked and suggested an hour of specific cuts from the 3-hour film. They argued the extended length would mean fewer showings, thus less revenue, even though long epics are more likely to help directors win Oscars. Cameron refused, telling Fox, you want to cut my movie? You're going to have to fire me. You want to fire me? You're going to have to kill me. The executives did not want to start over because it would mean the loss of their entire investment. So,
Yeah.
But they also initially rejected Cameron's offer of forfeiting his share of the profits as an empty gesture, as they predicted profits would be unlikely. Oh.
They were wrong.
And for the special effects, he wanted to push the boundary of special effects with this film and enlisted Digital Domain and Pacific Data Images to continue developments in digital technology, which the director had pioneered while he was working on The Abyss and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Many previous films about the Titanic were shot water in slow motion, but they just didn't look convincing. So he encouraged his crew to shoot for their 45-foot long miniature of the ship as if we're making commercial for the White Star Line. And afterwards, like digital water and smoke were added as well as like extras captured on motion capture stage. Fun fact, the Terminator from Terminator 2, the one with the liquid guy, first person to ever be motion captured. First person. And who directed that movie? James Cameron.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And there was also a 65-foot long model of the ship's stern that would break into repeatedly, the only miniature to be used in water. An enclosed 5 million US gallon tank was used for sinking the interiors, in which the entire set could be tilted into the water. In order to sink the grand staircase, 90,000 US gallons of water were dumped into the set as it was lowered into the tank. Unexpectedly, the waterfall ripped the staircase from its steel reinforced foundations, although no one was hurt in the process.
Jeez.
The 744-foot-long exterior of the RMS Titanic had its first half lowered into the tank, but as the heaviest part of the ship, it acted as a shock absorber against the water. So to get the set into the water, Cameron had much of the set emptied and even smashed some of the promenade windows himself. The post-sinking scenes in the freezing Atlantic were shot in a 350,000 US gallon tank, where the frozen corpses were created by applying actors on a powder that crystallized when exposed to water, and wax was coated on their hair and clothes.
That could not have been pleasant.
I doubt it. So the climactic scene, which features the breakup of the ship directly before it sinks, as well as its final plunge to the bottom of the Atlantic, involved a tilting full-size set, 150 extras, and 100 stunt performers. So Cameron criticized previous Titanic films because it showed it like a graceful slide underwater. He wanted to depict it as like the chaotic event that it actually was.
Yeah.
When carrying out the sequence, people needed to fall off the increasingly tilting deck, plunging hundreds of feet below and bouncing off of railings and propellers on the way down. A few attempts to film the sequence with stunt people resulted in some minor injuries, and Cameron halted the more dangerous stunts. The risks were eventually minimized by using computer-generated people for the dangerous falls, which is good on him. Like,
Yeah.
someone could have really died.
Yeah, seriously.
So during the first assembly cut, Cameron altered the planned ending, which had given resolution to Brock Levitt's story. In the original version of the ending, Brock and Lizzie see the elderly Rose at the stern of the boat and fear she is going to commit suicide. Rose then reveals that she had the Heart of the Ocean diamond all along but never sold it, in order to live on her own without Cal's money. She tells Brock that life is priceless and throws the diamond into the ocean after allowing him to hold it. And she does the same gasp, by the way. She goes, ah! The same exact gasp. I just had to point it out. She does the same exact one. I have to point it out. And after accepting that treasure is worthless, Brock laughs at his stupidity. Rose then goes back to her cabin to sleep, whereupon the film ends the same way as the final version. And in the editing room, Cameron decided that by this point, the audience would no longer care and Brock love it, and cut the resolution to his story so that Rose is alone when she drops the diamond. He also did not want to disrupt the audience's melancholy after the Titanic sinking. Paxton agreed that this scene with Brock's epiphany and laugh was unnecessary, stating that, quote, "I would have shot heroin to make the scene work better. You didn't really need anything from us. Our job was done by then. If you're smart and you take the ego and the narcissism out of it, you'll listen to the film, and the film will tell you what it needs and what it does not need," unquote.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I will say my 8-year-old son, the thing that made him the most upset isn't like, the boat sinking, etc. It's the throwing the diamond away.
It upset a lot of people. It upset me too. Like, you're right. He's not alone in that. Oh man. And as far as like the Jack and Lovejoy fight, it's like after Jack and Rose escape into the flooded dining saloon, test audiences didn't like it because it was redundant.
Yeah.
And for music and soundtrack. So he wrote Titanic while listening to the work of Irish New Age musician Enya. He offered her the chance to compose for the film, but she declined. He then chose James Horner to compose the film score. They had both parted ways after a tumultuous working experience working on Aliens. But Titanic cemented like a successful collaboration between the two that lasted until Horner's death. And for the vocals heard throughout the film, he chose Norwegian singer Sissel Kyrkjebø, commonly known as Sissel. He tried 25 or 30 different women to do it. He eventually chose her. And he also wrote the song My Heart Will Go On in secret with Will Jennings because Cameron didn't want any songs with singing in them. in the film. Celine Dion agreed to record a demo with the persuasion of her husband, Renee, her husband. Horner waited until Cameron was in an appropriate mood before presenting him with the song. After playing it several times, Cameron declared his approval, although he was worried that he would be criticized for going commercial at the end of the movie. Well, guess what? It's a very popular song.
Yeah.
And as far as the Heart of the Ocean, it was made for the film.
Okay.
And there were 3 different Heart of the Oceans made. 2 of them were used in the film. The third one was not used in the film. It was sold at an auction. It was donated to Sotheby's Auction House in Beverly Hills for an auction benefiting Diane, the Princess of Wales Memorial Fund and Southern California's Aid for AIDS. And it was sold to an unidentified client for $1.4 million.
That's a lot of money.
Under the agreement that Celine Dion would wear it 2 nights later at the 1998 Academy Awards ceremony. And the necklace has since not been made available for public viewing.
Huh.
And as far as release and reception, I think we already said like it was very popular.
Yeah.
Made a total of $2 billion. The first movie to break the $1 billion mark.
Wow.
And there is a stigma of men crying. So I think you might remember this. You know, you were in college at the time. It was like a stigma for men to cry at movies. And there were some movies that were approved, you know, I say that in quotes, approved movies for men to cry at.
Yeah.
This was one of them. And some men were like mocked for crying at Titanic. Like I've kind of grown out of that, you know, that toxic masculinity thing. Like, bro, it's emotions. Okay. It's not gay to feel emotions, guys. It's not, it's not gay to cry at Titanic. It's an emotional film. And there was just a huge stigma around it. And there was like many comments about it. I kind of think it's a little stupid to say that. Like the fact that there's a stigma in general is really stupid, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's okay, guys. It's okay to cry.
Probably good too. Yeah.
It's good for you. And home media. Okay. So you want to learn about home media? It was released worldwide in widescreen VHS formats in September 1st, 1998. So a year after its release. More than $50 million was spent to market the home video release of the film. In the first 3 months, the film sold 25 million copies in North America, with a total sales value of $500 million, becoming the best-selling live-action video, beating Independence Day. In that time, it sold 58 million copies worldwide, outselling The Lion King for a total worldwide revenue of $995 million.
So everybody but me watched it on home
Basically,
media.
Listen, I had a guest last season, right? And she's from an area where like she didn't have movies where she lived. Like she grew up in a very rural place and she didn't start watching movies until she was like in college, basically. And she had never seen Titanic until like this year, basically. And I said, that's kind of crazy because like I have my family from El Salvador and Honduras, right? They're from the campesinos. They're from really rural places and they've seen Titanic. That's like probably like the one VHS tape that they'll have. So it just still surprises me, you know? But by March 2005, the film had sold 8 million DVDs. In the United Kingdom, the film sold 1.1 million copies on its first day of release in DVD. Basically, when it came out on DVD, it was the first to ever sell 1 million copies. And at the time, only 5% of households had DVD players. So that's quite impressive.
Yeah, I worked at a video rental store in 1998. Yeah, around then.
Oh, wow.
And we actually would rent out DVD players because people didn't own them. And you had to put down a deposit of $200 if you wanted to rent a DVD player.
Wow. Would the money come back once you gave it back?
Yeah. It was just in case you didn't return it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really cool. I didn't know that.
I'm old is what I'm saying.
Did you get a chance to watch a lot of movies then?
Yeah, I mean, that summer, I'm sure that Titanic was at the video rental store and I could have gotten it free and I still didn't.
That was just on you then.
It was very much on me, yes.
Wait, so you said the summer of 1998. So this movie was released on VHS September of 1998. So it would have been after you left.
Okay, well then it's not my fault.
Yeah, it's not your fault.
That in 25 years I didn't manage to watch it.
Okay. Maybe that first year. But yeah, I'm giving you a lot of flack for this, but I did not see any of the Harry Potter movies or read any of the books for years. But my excuse was I was raised in a Christian household and we weren't allowed to watch it because it was witches and wizards.
Yeah.
And then now that I'm older, I just don't want to watch it because I find many of the fans obnoxious, and I already know how it ends.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for me. That was a lot of details.
That's a lot, yeah.
And I was just scratching the surface, guys. There's over 30 deleted scenes in the film, in the DVD's features that I got. I'm not sure if I already discussed that, but if you watch it and you watch all of it together, all in one go, it feels like you watched the movie all over again, but a much abridged version. So that concludes our conversation today. Thank you so much, Kelly, for being here. Really appreciate you talking about Titanic, watching it finally after 25 years. That's the whole point of this podcast, guys, to watch a film that's been on your watch list for so many years. And I think this is one of the top ones to watch. So thank you again for being here.
Yeah, of course.
So I want to ask you this final question. It's an important question. Was Titanic a hit or a miss with you?
I'm afraid it was a miss. It was just so very long. A shorter version of it, I would have liked a lot better.
I think I can justify it. I don't think I can, actually. But I am fine with it being that long. I was still entertained all the way throughout. There are some movies today that are trying to get into like 2 hours and a half, 3 hours, 3 hours time frame when they don't need to be. There's not enough story to fill that time frame. I'm talking about you, the Batman. Okay, you don't need to be 3 hours long. Okay, you don't need to be. Titanic, I can get into it because there are several characters that are in this film, and it just goes into different genres. But that's just my opinion. And that's your opinion. I'm old enough to know like it's okay to have different opinions.
Yes.
So is there anything else you'd like to promote right here?
Sure. So I host, edit, etc. a podcast called Unsung History, and we have not done an episode on Titanic. It's not exactly unsung, but I think anyone who enjoys sort of historic fiction like Titanic would probably enjoy the podcast. So you should check out Unsung History.
Yeah, I like history about people who aren't really known in the mainstream. I really like it.
Yeah, we talk about a lot of people that you've probably never heard of, but they're important in American history, or stories that you've never heard of. So that's sort of what I like to cover.
I would like to make the case for the chef in this who survived this wreck because he actually survived because of alcohol. I would like to make that case. It's up to you. But
it's a case. I'll consider it.
Okay. I think the people we need to hear his story. So where can we find you on social media?
So for however long Twitter exists, you can find me on Twitter at Feminist Kelly. I'm also on Mastodon now, fairly recently. And so those addresses are hard, but it's at Feminist Kelly at zirk.us, Zirkus. So you can find me on Mastodon there. And, just go to unsunghistorypodcast.com and you can certainly find ways to connect with me there.
So I also forgot to mention I like the website for Unsung History. It's amazing. An example I want to strive for. So go check out her website too.
So I make that website via Podpage, Podpage, which makes it very, very easy. Everything just feeds off the RSS. It's wonderful. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna look that up. So that's it for today, folks. You've been listening to the Hit List Podcast. This was Season 5, Episode 9. My name is Jason, and until next time, cross off a new film from your list.